Good evening. I am so delighted to be here with you as you celebrate the 200th year of the founding of your church. I dare say that neither you nor your church, I would not be here. None of us would be here without this incredible body of music that we have come to know as African American spirituals. So I just want to, people ask me all of the time, but Miss Ann, how did you discover spirituals? Why are you so in love with these songs? I admit, I totally am in love with these songs. Let's begin with the time. I'm born 1945 at the end of World War II. Soldiers are coming home with new ideas and new energies, and they are making babies. I'm one of them. And then the location. My mother and father moved from Meridian, Mississippi to Birmingham, Alabama in December of 1944, pregnant with me, the seventh child. And my father wants to become this young, up-and-coming Black preacher at this church called the 16th Street Baptist Church. Perhaps you know that name. It is the church, we should never forget it. It is the church that in 1963 was bombed and 4 children were murdered. I was born right next door to that church. Location, location, location. And then the next thing is birth order. I told you I was the seventh child. I was 7 out of 9. So in a big family like that, it's really easy for a kid in the middle, a sickly kid like me, to just kind of hide behind the door while everyone else is outside playing hopscotch and rock school and all of that stuff. Where is little Ann? Little Ann is behind the door, under the steps, some kind of way. I'm listening to what the adults are talking about. I found that far more fascinating than what the children were doing outside. And most times, the adults, other than gossip, they were doing that too. But most times, they were talking about what was going on in the race. And so I heard whole lectures out of the dining room, or sitting on the porch, my parents and their friends talking about the Montgomery bus boycott, the Thurgood Marshall and the Board of Education decision. I heard what my parents thought and felt about that. And so we opened with this song. Actually, it was Paula's idea to open with this song, You Can Tell the World About This. You can tell the nations about that. Tell them that Jesus is born. Tell them that the Comforter has come. We both like this song because it perfectly sets up what I want to try and leave you with. Believe me when I tell you, 10, 15 minutes is a challenge for a person like me, preacher's kid who loves to talk about this stuff. But I'm going to give it my best try, okay? So there are a few things when you finish listening to this little piece that I share with you, I want you to leave here. And I want you to go stand on the steps of your porch, wherever you stand, and say, let me tell you about this. Let me tell the world about that. The first thing I want you to know is that the people who created spirituals, our ancestors, spoke thousands and thousands of other languages. Mrs. Grundy did not say dialects, did I? That is the way Europeans put down anybody's language but their own. They speak German, they speak French, they speak English, but we speak a dialect. Our ancestors spoke thousands and thousands of languages. Some of these languages don't exist anymore because the people who spoke them have died out. But sometimes there were a handful of people who spoke a language, and sometimes there were millions of people who spoke a language. But can you imagine suddenly finding ourselves on the same ship on the same auction block and out here at Henry Clay's plantation. And we are all speaking different languages, but we've got to figure it out, don't we? Music becomes one of the ways that our ancestors got themselves on the same page. I remember when I was a little girl, one of my teachers said, music is the universal language, and that's absolutely the truth. The second thing I want you to know about these songs we call African American spirituals is that they had different sources of inspiration. So many of the songs, our ancestors observed nature. Remember, in the motherland in Africa, we were agrarian people. We grew tomatoes and corn and greens and all of those things. So we understood the earth, we understood how to time things based upon nature. So it makes perfectly good sense that one of the sources of inspiration for African American spirituals would be nature itself. You think I'm joking? Think about this. He's got the whole world in his hands. And the second verse is, he's got the woods and the waters. Just listen to that poetry. We're talking about people who could not speak English. English was forced upon them. But once our ancestors began to get it, they took the English language, turned it upside down, inside out, and created what is nobody can challenge this, the most beautiful language on the earth. He's got the woods and the waters in his hands. Shakespeare would die for that. The second source of inspiration for our people was the Bible, but in particular, the Old Testament. You would find very few spirituals that use the New Testament as a source of inspiration. Why the Old Testament? Because of the enslavement of the Jews, of the Egyptians, excuse me. And so our people, our ancestors, really identified with that. And it's all up in our music. Go down, Moses. We always talking about the Moses of our people. So we strongly identified with that as a source of inspiration. And then there was the circumstance itself of our enslavement. Here we were, away from everyone we knew, away from everything we knew. The weather was not natural to us. Many times we didn't have clothes. History records that our ancestors barely had clothes. And look at us today. And by that, I'm not suggesting that we don't have 1,000,000 miles yet to go. But history does not talk about any other people who have come through what African American people have come through and have done the things that we done. So often we are hard on ourselves. That's the lesson from the plantation. Henry Clay's plantation, you have to say to yourselves, how did Henry Clay and his wife, and maybe an overseer or two, control the comings and goings of 200, 300 African people? Divide and conquer. Don't forget that in 2020, divide and conquer. And so our ancestors used our circumstance, the situations in which we found ourselves, as inspiration for their music. So there are songs like, I've been bute and I've been scorned. Or one I know your church sings every Easter, were you there when they crucified my Lord? Were you there when they nailed him to the cross? All of these songs come out of our history, but I have a little secret to tell you. And sometimes Black people get upset when I say this. I'm trying to say we have to know the truth about these songs. or we will never be set free. So when we look at a song like Were You There When They Crucified My Lord, it is as if our ancestors knew 300 years, 400 years ago, that in 2020, there would be some African people in Lexington and Birmingham and Jackson, Mississippi, wherever we find ourselves, who would say, oh, you know, slavery wasn't that bad. Aren't we glad that we were enslaved? By the way, that's a theme in American history, that we should be grateful that we were captured and sold into bondage. And so you take a song like, Were You There When They Crucified My Lord? Guess what, brothers and sisters? That song is a snapshot of us. It's not about the crucifixion of Jesus. It's appropriate to sing it, you know, for the crucifixion of Jesus. But our ancestors knew that with the passage of time, and with, how do you say, all sorts of lies and distortions and twists, and the Bible really didn't say this, and da-da-da, and slave obey your master, and it goes on. They knew that one day we would end up saying it wasn't so bad. It was a common practice during the days of our people's enslavement, our physical enslavement. We've got another kind of enslavement now, but our physical enslavement, that the slave masters, remember, anything they did to you or me to punish me, they would make an example, they were making a statement to other people. So it was a common practice on main walkways or roads where people went from, let's say, Richmond, Kentucky, and they're walking here to Lexington, that on fence posts, slave masters would put the heads of our ancestors, because the point was not just that dead enslaved man, but for you to look at that head and to remember where you are in this world and who is always right. Of course, Black people are never right. And so a song like Were You There is a brutal reminder of our reality. Spirituals also written in coded language. The music, by the way, a little bit of Western music, you know, remnants and pieces of music on the other side of the water from Africa, and the rhythms. The rhythms of Black music, of spirituals, set us apart from all of the other musics in the world. It's the rhythm, distinct. You know you're singing a spiritual when you are singing a certain kind of rhythm. You know what I'm saying? And it has to be precise. But spirituals were written in coded language. So when I first started paying attention to them, I'm saying to myself, why are these people always singing about heaven and Jesus? You know, I'm 5 years old. You know, I got other things on my mind. You know, I want that little boyfriend over there, whatever was going on. And what I came to discover, of course, is that the language is coded language. In other words, the words don't say what they sound like they are saying. They are meant to cover. So I'm going to give you a quick vocabulary. Every time our people sing and say Jesus, they mean freedom and liberation by any means necessary. Remember, it's dangerous to stand out there at Henry Clay's plantation and talk about you're going to run away, you're going to do this. So you had to code it to protect your life. Black people still do that today. If my mother, and she was a great cook, you would never compliment my mother, not back in the day, and say, oh, Mrs. Beard, what wonderful rolls, what a wonderful meal you prepared. No, you wouldn't say that. If you really want to compliment my mama, what do you say? Oh, Miss Beard, you burn, girl. You burn. You put your foot in it. Black language is lively. It's always saying something that it doesn't sound like it's saying. That's our creativity. That's our intelligence that very few people, other people on this planet have. And so when we hear the word heaven, heaven means any place on this planet that slavery does not exist. When you hear the word, I'm on my way to Canaan's land. Look how smart our people were. They were talking about what? Canada. Why Canada? Because slavery was not legal in Canada. If you go to Canada now and you see African people there, I have met them from Mobile, Alabama. I said, how did you get to Canada? 300 years ago, our ancestors walked all the way from Mobile, Alabama, and settled here in Nova Scotia or wherever they are. Motherless child in the context of spirituals means a person who does not have a home. And remember, psychologically and spiritually and mental health wise, think of the things that slavery did to us and continues to do to us. It makes us feel, tell me in 2020 if I'm lying. It makes us feel as if we don't belong in this land. We get the signals all of the time, primarily from the current occupant of 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, but all of his followers and believers and so on and so forth. And then this is the one, because it's so physically close to us, when our ancestors would sing, I'm going to cross the River Jordan. Well, we know the River Jordan is like a physical place. We know in the Bible, you read about that, you hear about it in the Sunday school. What do you think they meant? They meant the Ohio River, because legally, once we crossed the Ohio River and we were smart enough to know to get there in the winter. Why? So that we could almost walk across that mighty river. But once we got across legally, technically, we were not in slavery anymore. But a good slave master like Henry Clay would send his best dogs, his best hunters. If someone like Paula could birth a lot of babies, or someone like my husband could father a lot of children, we were just bucks. They would come get you because you were valuable. So just crossing the Ohio River did not mean we in freedom, but technically, legally, it meant that. There are certain themes that go through spirituals that you're going to walk out here and tell people about. There's the whole theme, of course, of freedom, you know, and before I be a slave, I'll be buried in my grave. Then there's a theme of movement. Have you ever thought about how many of these spirituals are about things like, I got shoes, you got shoes, all of God's children got shoes. What are shoes about? Movement, getting out of here, escaping, saving my life, protecting my family. And then there are songs about trains. And here's something absolutely marvelous you can tell the world. Our ancestors not only sang about trains, the whole idea of movement, get on board, little children, get on board. But they also, according to historians, our ancestors could describe in detail what a train looked like, its function, who the conductor was, what happened here, what happened there. That's how profound this sense of freedom is, that we could imagine it. We were sleeping it, we were eating it, because we were going to make it happen. There were other subjects, of course, that have to do with these songs. The whole idea of democracy. Some of the songs like plenty good room, da, 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 plenty. That whole idea that there's enough here. There's enough in the world for us to share. Or my parents' favorite spiritual, let us break bread together on our knees. This whole idea of community, of democracy, that we take care of each other. Just as we cheer the weary traveler, we're going to then sit down and we're going to break bread together. Another thing you want the world to know about spirituals is that we owe those of us who are living. Remember, in the African tradition, the family is those who are gone, those who are yet to be born, and those of us who are living. That's the definition of family. We owe an incredible debt to the Black men and women, everybody from Nathaniel Dett to Harry Burleigh to Gregory Durrell White, to Minnie E. Chambliss, to Margaret Bond, to Dr. Everett McCorvey, to Cliff Jackson. We owe an enormous debt to them for arranging these songs, because it's the arrangement of spirituals. So on one hand, they are simple songs. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. That's kind of the common version. And there's a rare version. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. These songs are beautiful unto themselves, but you get a bad arranger on these songs, they get you up out of your seat. When I was a kid, coming to my daddy's church, in addition to great men and women of the race, Adam Clayton Powell Jr., Thurgood Marshall, King himself, Rosa Parks, I heard all of those people. Why? Because I live right next door to the church and I'm a busybody, okay? I acknowledge that. But in addition to that, Friday nights in the spring, Black colleges would go on tours with their choir. They knew that choirs and bands mattered. And so on Friday night, I would snuggle up under my daddy as we experienced the Fisk Jubilee Singers, you know, the original group that really put spirituals out there, the Hampton Singers, the Morehouse Glee Club, with whom my brother, we didn't even know he could sing, but he came to Birmingham on spring tour and was a soloist. The Tuskegee under William Dawson, the Tuskegee Choir, the world famed Tuskegee. These are all the choirs and the musicians like William Dawson, John W. Work, Harry Burleigh. These are the men and women who arranged these songs, directed these choirs. Guess what? There is a very good chance that had they not done that, we would not be here today. Certainly these songs would not be here, but we may not be here. I'm trying to get everything I can into 15 minutes and it's killing me. I've already blown it, okay? So you say, Mrs. Grundy, so what? Isn't it nice to know that there were once 6,000 of these songs and people sang them and it sounded like they were talking about heaven, but really they were talking about freedom. Isn't that nice to know? So what, you say, Ann Grundy? I'm going to give you 2 or 3 reasons to round out, to end this so what. The first so what is that these songs tell the American history that America doesn't want you to know or to remember. These are not just the sorrow songs of our people, but they are the songs that got us up and going, that said, keep your eyes on the prize. These are the songs that even when it seemed like there was no end in sight, our people could say, I don't feel no ways tired. These songs, if these songs didn't exist, we wouldn't even have them to move over into gospel music, which many Black churches perform now. You wouldn't have the basis for gospel music, or jazz, or blues, or R&B, or Motown. As Dr. McCorvey says, these songs are the mother lode. They are the substance. In fact, America didn't have its own music until we created this music, and until our brothers and sisters, we continue, I hope you change this, to call Indians. They are not Indians. They are the first people. Indians live in India. But between the first people and us, we created a sound that is the basis of American sound. The second thing I want to say about these songs, in addition to they inform us about our history, stuff they don't teach in school. I think every Black church, along with the Bible, ought to have all of the major Black history books and stories. My mother taught Sunday school in Birmingham, and towards the end of her life, when she was about 60 or 70, that's what she did. She would take in and outline her Bible lesson, but she would also have the story of the Reconstruction. She would translate and interpret what was happening during the Civil Rights Movement. But the second thing I want to say about these songs is that they help us to address and deal with our mental health and well-being. You know, what has happened to us in this country has not happened to anyone else on the planet Earth. We need some very special and unique therapy and counseling. Perhaps we need group therapy, I don't know. But who else hears about the end of slavery? And they drop their tools, their plows in the field, and they pick up babies. They don't even have clothes, history says. And they begin to walk from Lexington, Kentucky to Jackson, Mississippi, with only one thing in mind. They are trying to find family members they haven't heard from, they haven't seen in 50 or 100 years. Nobody else has ever done that. And therefore, that's how we end up. I ask Black people all the time, why do we call each other brother and sister? You can't make it up. Why do we call each other brother and sister? Because down here on Cheapside in Lexington, which has been renamed, our families were destroyed. Somebody went to Harrisburg, somebody else went to Tennessee. A child went to Danville. The mother and father stayed around in Lexington. Our family's torn apart. How many of you, I've had the experience all my life, somebody goes on vacation to California, to LA, and they come back and say, "And girl, I saw your twin." Guess what? That's real possible. We don't know who our kin people are. And so our ancestors walked and walked and walked and walked. And when they could not, or they realized it was going to be really difficult to identify family members, remember in Africa, family is everything. And so when they realized they probably were not going to find their lost relatives, we began, almost as if on the same cue, to call each other, "Hey brother, how you doing, sister? What's going on, brother, man?" Because the assumption is, you are my brother, you are my sister, until we have a reason not to be. I'm telling you, if you like me, being able to call other Black people brother and sister, has that saved me many a day in situations that I'm going, okay, I know this person. How you doing, brother? Yeah. So I'm just saying that that's a very sacred thing. And once again, we hear other people trying to incorporate it into their religious services or what have you. But for us, it's real, it's legitimate. But what I was going to say was that these songs help us to find our self-respect. You want to know in a big way, I know this is a complicated subject, but why our children go shooting up at the malls? Why, they get shot out here at Douglas Park? This is Black on Black crime. By the way, Black on Black crime, according to Dr. Akbar, is the stepchild of white on Black crime. Go other places in the world and see if Black people are doing some of the crazy things we now find ourselves doing. Why not? Their circumstances are different. Their history is different. The way this oppression comes down us, it says, turn around and kill somebody who is your brother, your sister, who looks like you, because that's a form of suicide. And so I'm saying to you in a very broad way that our children, certainly in schools, but who expects schools to really do right. We expect our homes, we expect our communities, and the Black church is a part of that, to teach this history. Because as Dr. Frances Welsen says to us, or she said to us, Black people, self-respect is dragging. That's the whole purpose of the enslavement, of Jim Crow, of the products of Reconstruction, to make us feel as if we are nobody, as if we are motherless children. And so the whole idea of knowing one's history is not just to be able to click off facts and figures and stuff like that, but the whole idea is to lift us up. And the more we lift up, someone is watching and we help them lift up. Okay? And so this brings me down to my to-do list. Everybody has a to-do list. Miss Ann is no different. I want you to know that these songs brought us through that enslavement, but they also got us through Reconstruction, the period right after slavery. They got us to the point we were building Black colleges and universities. They got us to the point that we were creating ways to do things for ourselves, because we can see where we are and what other people really think about us. Self-love and self-respect. So what do I encourage you to do after hearing me talk about these songs? Because I'm not just talking about the songs, am I? I'm talking about us. I'm talking about our future. So from here on out, every chance you get, when you see a book of spirituals, buy it. Nobody is printing much of these songs anymore. If you don't want it, give it to Ann Grundy. She loves them. She loves them. This one you've seen. I see these in all sorts of Black churches. And inside of them, there is a history of African American spirituals. Read it. It's very, very important. I want you to read books. You know, and we all need to be on our knees right now, praising the universe for Black Lives Matter. Because at a time when we thought, these little songs you see got us up through the civil rights movement. You know, so instead of saying Moses or what have you, you would substitute a name like Bull Connor. Think about it, the 1965 Voting Rights Act, that footage you see of all of these Black people at Berea College, we were there. We had a student body of 58 students, faculty and staff, who went to that. But crossing that Edmund Pettus Bridge had not people, because you remember it was dangerous, been singing, ain't gonna let nobody turn me around, turn me around, turn me around, ain't gonna let nobody turn me around. We would not have the 1965 Voting Rights Act. The Voting Rights Act that, in watching Black Lives Matter on TV, because I'm in the house because of the virus, I said to Chester, I didn't know we had so many Black mayors. So many, is it just me? So many Black women mayors. And of course, Barack Obama, 1965 Voting Rights Act. Don't you tell me voting doesn't count. We owe it to ourselves, to all of these men and women. November, and actually starting right now, you can vote by mail. Please vote, please vote. We can't go through another 4 years of that madman and his followers. Many of them say they believe in Jesus Christ. You check it out for yourselves. But at any rate, this is a time to learn these songs, to heal, to restore ourselves. And if you're like me, I don't enjoy reading now. It's like I don't have the energy. I just don't want to sit there to do that. But you know, the first cousin to reading that is actually even better documentaries. Documentaries are wonderful. I mean, everything from Eyes on the Prize, which is the number one. It's the story of the civil rights movement. But there was one out called Tell Them We Are Coming. It's the story of Black colleges and universities. These schools continue to provide things for our children they cannot get any other place. Let's see, there are stories about the Pullman porters, these Black men who learned how to work their tips. We thought they were tumming, didn't we? But they were finding a way to live off of their tips, shining shoes, waiting on the dining cars for white people. And they would send, I know this story to be true. I've had friends to tell me. And their fathers would send home their paychecks so that their families could live. And the Pullman porters stepped up and provided the first Black college students in this country. All of those students at Fisk, Morehouse, those early students, their fathers were Pullman porters. Black people are magical. We can take nothing and make something out of it. We are called upon right now to do this, to rediscover these songs so that we can one day look back as we get through Black Lives Matter, and that just takes us to the next place. You know, it's a journey. It's a journey. And so I am delighted that I've been able to share with you a little bit of history of these songs that I call little jewels. But Anne Grundy would not be here. You would not be here. St. Paul's Church would not be here without these incredible jewels, these incredible creations. I thank you so much, and I wish you well. Thank you.